Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a presentation on updating your injury and illness prevention programs to include language relative to a pandemic, such as COVID-19. My name is Natalie Collins, and I'm the Director of Member Relations here at the California Association of Winegrape Growers. Pan American Insurance Services Loss Control Team recently developed a COVID-19 supplemental injury and illness prevention program for their clients and has graciously offered to share this information with COG members. Presenting today will be Hector Corona, a very fitting last name for the times. Hector is an account executive with Pan American, and Dan Castillo, who is a vice president of loss control services with Pan American. COG has worked with Pan American for over 25 years and is proud to endorse the competitive quality insurance and exceptional customer service that they provide. I personally have enjoyed working with Pan American team on a variety of educational topics for California winegrape growers, and I'd like to thank both Hector and Dan for partnering with us today on this webinar. Now, before we jump into the webinar, I want to go over a quick format of the presentation. We'll begin with a 40-minute presentation and then open it up for Q&A. Please feel free to type and submit your questions on the dashboard as we go, and we will answer all questions at the end. If you'd like to ask a question verbally, simply raise your hand and I will unmute you so you can do so. And lastly, I will provide a copy of the presentation as well as a recording of this webinar to each of you on the call today. So now, without further delay, I'll turn the presentation over to Hector and Daniel.
Thank you, Natalie. Welcome everyone to the COVID-19 IIPP Employers Supplemental Program and Guide. My name is Hector Corona, and yes, it's Corona, not the coronavirus. I've been getting grief since December, but I'm over it now. But with me is my co-presenter, Dan Castillo. Just so you know, we are sitting 6 feet apart, and we'll be co-hosting this webinar. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Hector. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure being here. And if we get any closer, I did bring masks, the N95. I only have one left. It was given to me as a present. And then also I have my gloves. And then we have some hand cleaning sanitation devices here to be safe and keep safe. Well, Hector?
Thank you all. So today's agenda, really the scope of this presentation is to help you understand and help you implement safe practices for COVID-19 illnesses at your workplace. Some of the areas that we're going to be covering today is we're going to share some statistics. We're not going to spend too much time onto that. So I'm pretty sure all of you guys are being kept up to date on the statistics in California on the everyday news. We're going to spend some time kind of going over and understanding the devastating consequences of the agriculture industry. This is kind of why our main focus was to do this presentation to protect our people. So we'll be going over that. We'll be sharing some guides and some helpful insights of how to comply with the regulatory requirements from CAL-OSHA pertaining to COVID-19. We're going to kind of coach you guys on how to implement and safety practices on for workers that have been exposed to COVID-19. And then at the end, we'll share some resources and links that have helped us develop this program, and I'm pretty sure they'll help you. So I'll first hand it over to Dan so he can go over the statistics and the impact on agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Corona. I hope you could hear me okay. I was told that my voice is a little muffled, but I'm going to try to solve that problem by speaking clearly and directly into this golden microphone that we have here. So I don't know about you folks, but I'm overloaded with the statistics and information and so forth, everything about COVID. I know how important it is for us to keep updating ourselves and to protect our workforce, but not only that, but our family as well. So to start off the presentation, we want to go over some of the statistical and demographic information just for the state of California. I know each state's a little bit different, each region is a little bit different, each county is a little bit different, each town and city is a little bit different, but let's talk about California a little bit here, okay? So some of the statistical information here on the COVID, and this changed daily. And this morning I was watching the Today program and it has changed here. But it gives you the age confirmation cases, the gender confirmation cases, hospitalization cases as well. And this is put out by the Public Health Department of California and so forth. So, but these cases, they do change daily. I think there was 192 deaths yesterday, and we try to keep this updated, but this is as of May 4th and so forth. But And you could tell in California what we call the hot spots where the COVID are occurring there in the state of California. Some of the northern counties, very little, and that's why they're asking the governor, and they have opened a lot of the businesses up there and so forth. But just keep in mind, it is existing, and for the most part, I think California did a pretty good job in trying to contain this. I think we still have to, keep doing what we're doing and just do our diligence and open the businesses slowly and cautiously, but they do have to open. People are suffering economically. Here's very interesting in some of the statistics here. Latino, and then again, this is from the California Department of Public Health. And we look at the different demographics and ethnicity and race and so forth. And Latinos, Mexicanos, it's kind of grouped into that. And these are not our kind of statistic information. And again, this comes from the public health and how they separate the different ethnicities and races and so forth. I guess what I'm looking at, and the concern is here that this is 38.9%. How much of that is the agricultural workforce? It does not break that down, but it just gives you the indication that the population of the Latinos or Hispanic, it is an issue and it is a problem. So just keeping that in mind of that. But again, this is as of May 4th, and again, these statistics are changing all the time. But just something to reference about it. So and the reason we bring this up, because the workforce, we look at agricultural workforce and we see predominantly the Latino, the Hispanic population working in the agricultural workforce. Okay, so essential critical infrastructure workers. Okay, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security on 3/19/2020, they identified these 9 points. I think there's more points now. I think there's up to 12 now as we go through this. But look at agriculture and food and agricultural production and distribution and so forth, just the whole realm of agriculture. It's number 3. Now, keep in mind, if you think that our public is going, how can I say this? They had a very concern of the lack or the lack of toilet paper funding. Can you imagine if we had lack of food out there? We have to continue, because as my dad, who's 82 years old and still working out on the ranch as a foreman and so forth, he goes, we still need to feed our people. And he's 82 years old and he hasn't stopped working because he understands this. Even these days, he's out there. I said, Dad, you're putting yourself in risk. He goes, I understand that we're taking cautions and precautions, but I still have to help feed the world, as he puts it. So, and for us, in my opinion on this, we have to continue what we're doing. Do we have to get better at this? Yes. Do we have to get smarter at this? Yes. Do we have to put process and procedures in place? Yes. Because if our workforce gets infected with this COVID-19 disease and it spreads like wildfire, we're going to have some issues out there trying to feed this country. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Is it occurring? Is it happening? Yes. Meat processing plants in the Midwest are having some issues out there and so forth. One report indicated that 80 individuals got infected with the COVID, and they had to shut down. Here locally, the Frito-Lay plant also got infected with COVID and their workforce and so forth. They had some procedures in place, and I really couldn't tell you what they had in place and so forth. Was it enough? I don't know. But they're re-looking at this thing. They're re-looking at the process and procedures and so forth. And buyers, if it's the major buyers, they're also taking a look at what are the companies doing to protect the workforce. Wine industry, if we continue to do what we're doing the way we did it, it's not going to work, in my opinion. And that's been publicized, if you will. Okay, so we as an organization, as the food production, especially here in California, the nation and the country relies on what we do here in the state of California, food production wise. So we can't miss a step. If we do, it's going to be catastrophic, in my opinion. So, and please keep in mind, I don't want to sound like I'm lecturing, but I've been in this business all my life. I grew up on a farm with my dad. He showed me how to work on a farm, and I've been involved with agriculture all my life. And we cannot miss a step here. We're the adults here, and we have to do everything as possible to protect our workforce, the family farm, and in a way of life. All right, next slide. COVID-19 risk exposure, there's 4 categories. And if you look at these categories, obviously the very high categories, those brave healthcare workers that are working day in and day out tirelessly with the individuals who are affected and try to save their lives. And my hat goes out to them. When, for example, when New York called and they asked for help and assistance because they were the epicenter, the nation rose up and they went to help in all aspects of life. Here we look at the medium exposure risk for the employees here, and this includes the agriculture. But my opinion that this thing could raise, and again, if we get an epidemic in the workforce, if this spreads through the workforce of agriculture. Right now, we've been assisting the packing facilities. They're gearing up. The apricots, the cherries, and the stone fruits are coming up. So we've been working with them, helping them put programs and procedures together and protocol to protect the workers out there. And not just one issue is going to fit all. We have to take a look at the whole process and what we could do to protect the workers out there. So keep in mind, these are the 4 categories. And again, agriculture is in the 3rd medium risk exposure, but that could change rapidly. All right, let's go to the next slide. Hector, is there anything else you want to add to this?
No, I just agree with you that if there is a widespread of cases within agriculture, this could easily, they move agriculture into the high or very high risk exposure. So it's just, like I said, this information changes daily, and it could easily move up.
So let's take a look at the big picture here and so forth. And obviously, okay, I read some statistics that 36 million Americans are out of work right now. But not everybody could just jump into the agricultural scene and do agricultural work. It's a special trade, in my opinion. Can anybody just climb a ladder and start picking cherries? No. Can anybody just go to the field and start picking strawberries? No. These are specialized activities that for many years, employees have many skills of doing this. But let's look at the big pictures. Big pictures. What we need to do as the agricultural community to protect our workforce out there. What do you see here? I know I can't hear you, but I know what you're thinking. Why are they gathering? Even after we discussed 1 time, 2 times about the importance of being separate, 6 feet, distancing each other. With this, when I saw this, I stopped and I talked to the supervisor, I talked to the owner, and I talked to the lead individuals here. We have to constantly educate and train our people, or I say our people, but the agricultural workforce, that this can happen. They could be infected by this situation. In one instances, they do a good job when they're doing their activity and so forth, but at the beginning of the work, during lunch, or even a safety meeting, they start gathering together, and it's up to the supervisors or the person in charge to start separate these individuals more. Now, I understand you see that vehicle there. Perhaps those individuals ride together and live together or what have you. Okay, that in my mind could be acceptable, but everybody else who gathers together like this, they have to be separated, and they have to be masked if they're going to gather in that short distance. Hector, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, pretty much, and it varies from industry to industry. Obviously, in the vineyard industry, I've seen different organizations put out maps and guides of how to spread out employees. I've seen that from COG. I've seen that from the Napa Valley grape growers, and they really set up with some good guidelines of how to spread out people. And they've taken a huge step on really enforcing and convincing our workforce to spread out. So that's very important, but that doesn't stop the constant reminders that they have to do every single day. And when I speak to my clients, on an everyday basis. That's one of the frustrations that they have, that just people don't get it. I guess, you know, we went out and did inspections yesterday at a vineyard crew, and we happened to be at a crew where they took their break, and they have extra hand washing stations. And to be honest with you, when they took their break and came out to do their break, I think there was, out of the 15 people that we saw, only 3 people washed their hands, or at least we saw them wash their hands. And you know, we constantly have to remind our employees that washing hands, staying away from each other 6 feet is very, very important.
Thank you, Hector. And again, this is constant education, not just training. Educate our employees on the importance of this, and then enforcing all the policies and procedures in the world, or all the posters you're going to have up and so forth, are not going to be useful if we don't start enforcing. All right, let's go to the next slide. But it gives you an idea of what we're facing out there. Now, the COVID-19, the monitoring and enforcement agencies, and there's various. This is just the example of some of the agencies that are looking at this, enforcing this, coming up with policies, procedures, ideas, and so forth. There's many. And the governor, again, they have a lot of authority out there, and they're following the CDC guidelines and the public health guidelines and so forth. CAL-OSHA is getting more involved in this, and I've talked to 5 CAL-OSHA directors or district managers throughout California, and they're gearing up, so to speak. They're not going out as much, but they will be, and they're taking a look at this COVID-19 because it can be considered an occupational hazard out there with the workforce, and so they're going to be gearing up in there. And they just recently put out a publication here that we'll be discussing here in a little bit. Okay, so just the different counties have their own mandates, if you will, and requirements. 2 weeks ago, Monterey County in that area, they stopped a crew of strawberry harvesters because they were not wearing any face covering or any protection. They're fine when out in the field, but when they come bring in the product to get tallied and so forth, they start gathering too close and they didn't have their masks. So a health department inspector did stop that crew. All right. And here's where we're at this point with the employers' CAL-OSHA requirements due to COVID-19. And this comes out of the Title 8, Section 3202, which is the Injury and Illness Prevention Program. I'm sorry, 3203, sorry. I took off my glasses for a minute, so bear with me here. Thank you, Hector. I love this team teaching. We could correct each other. But anyway, the Injury and Illness Prevention Program, this was established in 1989, I believe, when Governor then Duke Majan was in office and so forth, and then it was enforceable in the 1991 and 92. But it basically, it says this: if it's not in Title 8 directly, let's say that COVID-19 is not in Title 8, doesn't mention it by name or so forth, but it's a perceived and recognized hazard, okay? And it can affect the workforce. It can affect the place of work, or the job site, I should say, or the employer's place of business. Then the employer has to do everything possible in order to protect employees, and that's where that comes from. I give this example like ATV, all-terrain vehicle. It is not written in Title 8, and that's where the CAL-OSHA enforcement officers can enforce it from Title 8. It's not there that says the ATV helmet must be worn. If an accident occurs or they see somebody on an ATV, all-terrain vehicle, that doesn't have a helmet, they could go back to the manufacturer and says, okay, a helmet must be worn. Okay, now, having said that, it is a perceived and known hazard if employees operate an ATV in a hilly terrain. The probability and the possibility of that person overturning that ATV is high. So common sense tell you they should wear and approve a helmet by the Department of Transportation, the DOT. So that's where they could cite you, even though it's not specific in the Title 8 regulations. But because the manufacturer requires it, and the employer it knows or it's a perceived hazard, and that's why they need to provide that. If that makes sense. So that's why I get a lot of questions about this if it's not exactly in Entitled 8. Okay, Hector, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I agree with you. There's a big gray area, and we've been getting that. This is the #1 question we get. Is it enforceable? What regulation are they implementing or they're enforcing the COVID-19 program under? And our answer is there's really no regulation out there. They look at it under Title 8, Section 3203, which is the Injury and Illness Prevention Program. There's a big gray area, and that's why it's very important that you have your written procedures in writing, so you could show whoever's enforcing, whatever enforcement agent comes in, and you show them what procedures you're taking to prevent the spread of COVID-19 at your workplace.
Thank you, Hector. And again, infectious diseases, there is a provision in Title 8, and that's more for the healthcare workers that they have to do, or they have to have a written program, but that's separate from the agricultural standards that we're looking at. Some of the other frequent questions that were asked is, are employees required to develop a written infectious diseases preparedness and response plan for agriculture? Currently, there is not one that's required, but going back to the known and perceived hazards, we understand this is a known and perceived hazard in infectious diseases that can affect the workplace and the workers out there. So we have to put something in writing, we have to put something in place, and this is why we developed the supplementary program, and we're going to be discussing here in a few moments. Here's another frequent questions that ask, are employers required to modify the current injury and illness prevention program, the IIPP? Answer is no. The IIPP has 8 elements and should not be altered, okay? The COVID-19 is a supplementary written program containing safe and best practices, elements to prevent worker exposures, and that's what we're going to be discussing and so forth. So we want to provide you a foundation that you could build on, and it's, as we get more and more information on the COVID from the medical side of the CDC, then that program should be changed to fit your organization. Okay. And this is the COVID-19 illness prevention program that we put together using a variety of sources and knowledge and experience that we have out in the field. Hector, is there anything else?
Yeah, so we developed the program. I know there's other guidelines put out there by different associations, including AgSafe and so forth, and CAL-OSHA. We developed our own, and the way we approach it is, it's not a cookie cutter program. We really talk to our clients and help them develop a illness prevention program related and directly associated with what they're doing at their place of work. Again, it's not a cookie cutter program. It's not just that we hand it out and let them figure it out, or because we know that most employers look at it and it's pretty hard to develop something wording that might work, or it's confusing. So this is the illness prevention program that we developed, following obviously the guidelines from CAL-OSHA that were issued back in March, and they were actually updated on May 5th, which is 2 days ago. And we'll go over the changes. So these are some of the elements that the program should have. So employee training, and I'll go through these, we'll go through these individually, element by element. So employee training, procedures to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 at the work site, implement procedures to increase physical distancing, reporting procedures to report potential COVID-19 disease, good sanitation practices, and we've implemented a section on personal protective equipment when applicable. And I'll define when applicable, because not everyone's providing PPE across California. And like Dan said, it all depends on what county you work for and what enforcement guidelines you have from the county health department or the mayor. So it's and we know that it's different throughout the state. So we'll go through it in specific on that slide. So let's start with employee training. Really, I know there's a lot of guides and information out there coming from different sources. We really recommend our employers and our clients to really follow CDC guides and OSHA information. That is the two agencies that really keep their information up to date. They change it daily, they change it weekly. So we recommend that whatever handout you give, make sure that whatever handout and information is on that handout follow CDC guidelines and OSHA information. So just so you're covered. We do recommend that when you're doing employee training, you do social distancing, follow social distancing guidelines. As a trainer, you do have to implement social distancing measures. We're implementing it through our team. You know, in the past, we would do groups of 60, 100 people. Now we're telling our clients, hey, listen, we could still do the training, but can we do groups of 10 or less? That way we're following guidelines and protecting your employees and protecting ourselves. So you have to follow the same guidelines that everyone else is following as far as training. Not only do the training, but you have to actually review your program with them and tell them that there is actually a program and there's written procedures for the COVID-19 program. And then when you do the training, cover topics such as understanding the COVID-19. What is it? How does it work? Where does it come from? Cover symptoms. You'll be surprised how many people still don't understand and know the symptoms. We get questions on a daily basis and comments from our daily basis from our clients saying, hey, I have this worker that showed up with high fever and chills. What do I do? Send them home. You know, you have to constantly remind them of the symptoms. Again, you'll be surprised at how many people don't know the symptoms. Teach them and communicate the reporting process. What happens if you are working with an employee and you hear that employee is not feeling well? What do? What is the reporting process? Kind of follow a training process and teach them what the reporting process is. Practicing personal hygiene. It's very important, not only at work. Teach them that, you know, hygiene is important at work, but also at home when you come in. You can control what happens at work for a certain amount of time, but after you go home, you still have to practice personal hygiene as well over there. Use technology and training aids. We have a lot of vineyard managers that have computers, smartphones, and iPads that now they've started to do videos and show presentations. They don't gather big groups, so they go crew by crew and they show a video either from YouTube or from other sources. And also train the trainers. So if you had one safety coordinator, it is very important that you get that coordinator some help. Train other people to help that trainer help train other workers. That way you cover a widespread, a broader coverage within your workforce. And the most important thing when it comes to training is following up. You can do all the training that you want, and you can do training until you're blue in the face, but if you don't follow up and ensure that your employees are doing what you're training them to do, it's going to fail. They're most likely not going to understand or take it seriously, like we saw in some of the pictures earlier. Dan, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just a couple of things on the training. Just because you do it once, then okay, I did it, then I don't have to do it again. No, not with just any training. There's got to be follow up and retrain and retrain and retrain and retrain until people start understanding whatever the subject matter. Rather than training, you want to educate. You want to tell them and explain why we need to do this. Okay, and then the personal hygiene. We're going to go through that a little bit more, but I suggest you get more, especially out in the field, more restrooms for the employees, have smaller crews. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but all these points are very important.
So helping prevent the spread of COVID-19, if you are going to do anything that's important, do this. Send the people that show respiratory or severe symptoms home. There shouldn't be any exceptions. If someone's showing any kind of a symptom, severe symptom, like they're having problems breathing, or they show fevers, the chills, I would really take that seriously to protect you and your workforce and send them home. There shouldn't be any exception. You know, there's some resistance sometimes because they come in with a ride. Someone's riding with somebody. Somebody's coming from Lodi and they're driving all the way to Napa. You have to take your precautions and isolate that person. Work with your local health department to establish reporting procedures. Everybody has to look at your local health department. What are your reporting procedures? Are you supposed to report COVID-19 cases. Some counties do require it, some counties don't. Constantly remind employees of the symptoms and remind them to stay home if they're sick. Establish cleaning and disinfection procedures for whatever it is, cleaning tools, cleaning your work trucks, cleaning surfaces. Establish cleaning and disinfection procedures. Ensure hand washing stations and disinfecting materials are available. We have some vineyard managers that have taken above and beyond. They've created extra hand washing station out of coolers. They've worked with local wineries to buy extra sanitation. I know some of the wineries have moved to producing hand sanitation, hand sanitizer. So they've worked with some of the wineries to get extra hand sanitizer to provide them to the workers. So whatever you could do to establish a disinfectant procedure, it shows positive. Frequently check essential cleaning and other critical supplies. Like I said, we've been doing inspections with our clients that have a program like this, and one of the things that we find is that they run out of paper towels, they run out of soap. Not only is that part of your regular Title VIII requirements, but it's very important that you check your regular cleaning supplies, like or cleaning and critical supplies, like paper towels and soap and water. Procedures to increase physical distancing, limit contact with people. I know this is so crazy, but and you do have to do your part to really limit the contact with people, and especially during breaks. I know you could do it during regular working hours, but during breaks and lunch hours, that's where you're going to have the hardest time. Obviously, have employees practice social distancing whenever possible. Stagger shifts when possible. Stagger crews and breaks. I know in the transplanting crews, they've been staggering the transplanters and crews and what time they start. Some people start at 6, the next crew starts at 7, the next crew starts at 8. So whenever possible, they start staggering shifts and staggering breaks. Again, discourage large gatherings. And if you have deliveries, you should have some sort of implemented procedures for people that come from the outside to drop off packages. Dan, do you want to mention a little bit more about the staggering shifts and staggering crew breaks?
Especially in the packing house now, we implemented some different protocols and so forth. At one packing facility, and we had just one large parking lot, so we divided those parking lots up a little bit, and we had an additional parking lot, so not everybody would park there and then start gathering there and walking to the packing house. Number one, we limit the individuals who enter the packing house. They have another entry point, if you will, if you're non-employee and they have to get to the office of some sort. Breaks, and again, the issue is with the bathrooms. We have 100 employees and we have X number of bathrooms and so forth. They start providing different breaks at different time on the line. Sometimes you can't do that because everything is connected from point A to point Z. The product has to come through, but whenever possible, they're trying to stagger the breaks that way, especially the bathroom breaks, so we don't have the individuals, the whole crew or the whole packing facility try to get to the bathroom at the same time. So those are kind of the things they implement. The lunch breaks, we start separating. We got some additional tents out there. We got some cooling units out there to cool those areas for the break area, for the lunch area, and also the microwaves. We separated the microwaves. We got more microwaves, so nobody is gathering around the microwaves. Refrigerators, so they have refrigerators out there. We got more refrigerators, and we start separating the refrigerators. So we're constantly thinking and implementing different aspects in order to prevent these individuals from gathering, especially during the break times or during the lunch time.
I think the biggest part is really implement what you could do out in the field, especially in the vineyard industry, is providing more hand washing stations and more seating, more shades, especially with the summer coming in. The more shade structures you have, the better possibility you have people social distancing and 6 feet apart. Good sanitation practices, implementation of good sanitation practices. Obviously, implement good sanitation practices that work for your operation. There's programs out there that that you can download from either associations or CAL-OSHA. Really, again, any program that you download and somebody gives you, it shouldn't be just a copy and paste program. It should really identify what you're doing at your operation. So these sanitation procedures that you're doing should be what you're actually doing at your operation. The sanitation practices should include, how do you clean your restrooms? If you used to clean them once a week, are you cleaning them now 3 times a week or twice a week? If you provided hand washing stations, where are you going to locate them now? Is it only in the bathrooms, or are you going to have them also in the shades? How are you going to clean commonly used surfaces? I know in the vineyards, obviously we don't have that many commonly used surfaces, but we do have tools. We have radios. Our supervisors taking their radios home. How are they ensuring that the radios are being cleaned or maintained or disinfected? If you have employees taking company vehicles home, are you establishing procedures? Are you establishing policies to really have them clean their vehicles? Is there a checklist of things that they should be cleaning? And then if you have tablets and other electronics, are you taking the proper procedures to clean the tablets and other electronics? That's very important. And I think the most important thing to remember here is that you have to, with all these procedures that you're implementing, you do have to provide extra time for employees to perform these sanitation practices. There's no other way to do it, unless you're working through the break or lunch, which we don't recommend. We do recommend is allowing extra time for employees to perform these sanitation practices.
Just one thing on the restrooms, because I get a lot of calls from our policyholders and the people we work with, is how often should I clean the portable toilet? Well, there's 2 things. The sanitation and cleaning of the toilet is one thing, but every time somebody uses it, is there a possibility of somebody getting infected by the COVID-19? And the answer would be yes. So what we're having is additional cleaning, if you will, for sanitation, and we also have we have wipes that employee takes a hand wipe, clean the handle, clean the inside, and then make sure we have covering for the seating and so forth. And then that tends to help with the sanitation process. It's just a protocol, excuse me, and a procedure. But in addition to that, because right now the regulations require 1 bathroom for each sex for 20, so 20 male, 20 female, if you will. I'm requesting, or I'm asking, if we could divide the crew up and then have more restrooms out there available, instead of having a set of double, get a set of triple, so you have that additional restroom out there that could be used, so not 1 in 20 is using that restroom as well. So those are the procedures we're recommending put in place to prevent the spread. Hector?
So frequently asked questions about PPE. So we get a lot of questions about, should we include a PPE section on our COVID program? The answer is currently you're not required, but if you are recommending or providing personal protective equipment, we highly recommend that you do have a section on personal protective equipment in your COVID-19 IIPP. Why? Because if you look closely at the guidelines that came out through CAL-OSHA, although they say that it's not recommended for someone to wear N95 respirators, they do leave it a wide open and a very gray area that you have to provide some sort of protection for other harmful agents. There on the left right here with the circle there, that's the note. And if you read there, other harmful agents, if you go to the definition, CAL-OSHA definition of harmful agents, it does include viruses. So it leaves a big area, sorry, there's a helicopter here downtown, there's a big noise. There's a big gray area on what's recommended or what's not. If you look at the CDC guidelines, obviously CAL-OSHA is recommending that it's following CDC guidelines. So the face masks and cloth face coverings coming recommendation from CDC. Obviously CAL-OSHA is following the CDC guidelines, so they're going to implement some sort of recommendation on that. So what is your PPE section? What should it look like? So obviously, if you're providing gloves, if you're protecting protective clothing, masks, self-made protection devices like cloth, scarves, anything like that. If you're recommending or you're handing them out, you should have this section in written procedures of what you're handing out and how often you're handing them out. Are you handing them out? Are you going to provide them every day? Are you going to provide them on a weekly basis? Are you going to give them out to them? This section should apply only if you're doing that, and it should state what you're doing with the personal protective equipment. Dan?
Yeah, just a little follow up on this, and thank you, Hector. But and again, and sorry about the noise in the background, the helicopter flying by. We're right down the street from the Capitol, and I think the governor was going someplace with his entourage, and there was 2 helicopters. But anyway, this is important because right now we're having some issues with some of the employees wearing these masks. It's getting hot. And if they're not accustomed to wearing these masks and so forth, that labors their breathing. So you got to be cognizant of that and look out for that, and have your employer supervisors be trained on looking out for people who are distressed and using the mask. What's very interesting to me on this, if the employer mandates this and they give a specific mask, and if they have the N95 or anything that relates to a respirator, I know CAL-OSHA kind of, I'm not saying ignoring the guidelines, but has lessened the guidelines, because anybody who wears a mask that's mandatory, it's an N95 respirator, they have to have a medical clearance by an occupational doctor, either by going to the doctor and getting tested and so forth, or going online and filling out a 4-page medical questionnaire. But they've loosened the guidelines on that. And again, the mask comes in all different shapes and all different coverings. But for now, what I would recommend, that some kind of face covering covers the nose and the face if it's homemade. But take a look at it, make sure that it's appropriate, and the individuals who are wearing it are not laboring in breathing. And if so, then we have to take a look at maybe using different masks out there. Okay.
For emergency action procedures, I'll let Dan expand on this, on what we need to do in order to prevent, once we know someone's infected or it's been exposed to COVID-19, there's really certain things that you have to take in mind and do at your workplace before you let that person back in. So you want to go through that, Dan?
All right, and I can. And again, we get a lot of questions. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do if somebody has been exposed to this? There should be protocol procedures, and this is from the CDC and other agencies that came up with this. The pre-screening of employee, temperature-wise, some companies are measuring temperature before they walk into the plant. A lot of the meat packer facilities back east are checking temperatures. You see on the COVID task force and the president that everybody gets their temperature checked. But this is one of the indications that they may be exposed to the COVID. Regular monitoring of the workforce, and again, a lot of companies that I walk in there, they ask me the 4 questions. You know, do you have a fever? Do you have a cough? Do you shake, illness, or anything? And no. Even some banks are doing it before they start, before you go into the facility or that business. Wearing a mask, and again, that is going to help with the exposure and the transmission of the COVID disease and so forth, or the virus, I should say. And then the 14 days exposure, the social distancing, we've been talking a lot about that, the disinfecting and cleaning of the work surfaces. And again, you should have a protocol procedures to do this periodically, to disinfect everything basically, and particularly if somebody's been exposed. Now, here's some of the strategies that we're working with. If we have a group of individuals who ride together or live together, we're having them work together, for example. Okay, so if one of them gets exposed, we could just take those individuals that they work together and live together, and we could isolate them. So that's part of the strategy that we're putting in place there. So if something does happen, then we don't have to disinfect everything. Just maybe that line, we could just start isolating that line or that area where these employees or been working together. If one individual becomes infected with the COVID-19. Hector, anything else on this?
No. What should I do after an employee tests positive? In most cases, you don't need to shut your whole operation down. or your facility or your whole operation. I think if you have someone that tests positive with COVID-19, you isolate the crew or the group of people that came or directly in contact with that person. You don't have to shut everything down. That's a common question that we get. Do we have to shut the whole operation down? No, you don't. I would, we really recommend, and CDC recommends that to wait 24 hours before cleaning and disinfecting wherever that person worked, any tools or anything like that. If you can't wait 24 hours, wait as much as possible. During the waiting period, open outside doors. I know you guys are working out in the open, but this goes like if you have a tractor driver that's working with a tractor that has a cabin, obviously open up the cabin and let it air out for a couple of days before you go in there and start cleaning the tractor. Obviously follow the CDC cleaning and disinfection recommendations. We have some links that if anyone hasn't seen these cleaning and disinfection recommendations, we have a link to that at the end of our slides, but there's specific disinfection recommendations that the CDC recommends. Clean dirty surfaces with soap and water. That's easy. Everybody has access to soap and water. It's as easy as that. We have, special vineyard managers that have actually designated one person to clean handles for the bathrooms and commonly touched areas within the crew. That means the water jugs, the tools, they keep a strict checklist for the cleaning and disinfection of those commonly used surfaces. We also, always wear gloves if you can provide gloves right now. I think it's a good way to start protecting people in case someone got already tested positive for 19. You may need to wear additional personal protective equipment, such as face shields. We have some agricultural industries that have provided face shields for their workforce if someone has tested positive, just to take an extra step to protect that crew. I know it's not going to be feasible for everyone, and again, you have to take in mind that the summer is coming in, and you have to take you have to identify every hazard as it comes in. So one being the heat and people fainting for wearing respirators. Dan, you want?
Yeah, just one thing, and it's good to have contingency plans and procedures and protocols in place. The President of the United States has indicated you will remain open. We have to feed our country and the world. So this is part of the reason we wrote this is to keep this business open. It is a critical and mandate. And the president and the administration was very direct on this. The order is, the mandate, the memorandum is keep our food supply flowing.
So what does our future hold for agriculture? If we knew what our future, what the future held for us, I think Dan and I would be very rich. But here's what we think what the future looks like for agriculture, and specifically for California. Obviously, when it comes to regulations, we see, I think there's no doubt that federal OSHA will come with some sort of regulation following this pandemic. And as we know, we live in California, and they've come up with stricter CAL-OSHA regulations, so it would be followed by CAL-OSHA, stricter CAL-OSHA regulations. We don't have a pandemic preparedness plan right now, but I'm pretty sure they will eventually put one in place and give guidelines for employers, and especially in agriculture, on how to prepare and how to prevent the spread of any pandemic throughout the workplace. And then right now there's specific bloodborne pathogen regulation, but it would come stricter on the agriculture side and be more specific for agriculture. That's what we see on the regulation side. What we recommend you do is really stay informed. Whatever you're doing, whether it's attending these WebEx and seminars through associations, keep yourself informed. Your broker should be giving you information on as soon as things change. We usually keep our employers and our clients updated every week. We send out a news blast. We have web links, things like that, to keep our clients informed of what's happening. Your insurance carrier should have some sort of guidelines and information that you could use to train. They're pretty good at updating their documents and doing an e-blast for their customers. So using the associations, brokers, insurance carriers, I think that's more than enough. Think outside the box. Right now, I know a lot of us want to follow some guides and really stick with them, really, but these things are changing rapidly and every day. So you really have to keep ahead of the game and think outside the box of creative ideas of what you can do to really protect your workforce. And finally, we have to prepare for the new normal. This is going to be the new normal. There's no other way to put it. This is going to change the way we do business, especially in agriculture. Do you have any to add?
And I think thinking out of the box and be creative, innovative, and really be very specific what you have to do with your organization, but not just your organization, but the agricultural community as a group. And we need to come together. And if we needed to establish our own task force to come up with new and creative ideas, we're just not going to wait for the federal government or the state government to come up with these ideas. I think on some of these issues, we have to take the lead with the information we receive, but make it more applicable for our organization in our place of business and work sites. And bottom line, protect the employees.
So again, the recommendations and information is changing daily, so stay up to date with the information that's changing. So we've put together some references and resources and links for you to help you out. Everyone's going to receive a copy of our presentation. These links are there too. So we at Relation and Pan American, we do have a link, a COVID-19 link that we've set up for the resources. This gives you access to a lot of information from the CDC, from the Department of Food and Agriculture. We've established a video resource library that we've developed after this pandemic hit. There's a couple of videos in English and Spanish that we put out for our customers. You can check it out. They're pretty informative and useful when it comes to training your employees. Fisher Phillips, the attorneys at Fisher Phillips have developed a frequently asked question link. This is updated constantly, and it's a pretty good questionnaire, and it can answer a lot of questions when it comes to not only safety and health, but wage and hour and leave of absence and stuff like that. The California Department of Food and Agriculture has a cool website with checklists and that are strictly linked to the food and agriculture industry. And obviously the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. And obviously we'll open it up for questions, but one thing before we go into questions, we do have the program and it's available for all of our COG members. And we're more than happy to share our program with you. But again, we want to remind everyone that this is not a cookie cutter program. This really needs to be updated and modified pertaining, make it specific to what you're doing at work. So if you guys, here's our information for Dan and myself. If you want to email us, if you want to call us, and we'll help you change your COVID-19 program. We'll help you implement it. And give you a soft copy of this so you can keep it updated. So at this point, Natalie, do you want to open it up for questions?
Of course, Dan and Hector, thank you guys both very much. If you guys have any questions that you would like to ask of Dan or Hector, please feel free to type them in on your dashboard. If you'd like to ask a question verbally, just simply raise your hand and I can unmute you. We do have a few questions coming in. The first one is talking about creating your supplemental IIPP for COVID-19 or for pandemics. What kind of information or should you provide the supplemental to your workforce? And if so, do you need to provide it in the language of your employees?
So we do recommend that you have it out in the crew. So we are recommending our employers or clients to have it where you have your heat illness program. Usually they'll have it, at a standard place where either on the shade structure. It has to be available, and we do offer it in English and Spanish. So I do recommend that you have it out in the field. You don't have to give a copy to every single employee, but you do have to have access, or have them have access to the program.
Perfect. And when doing the trainings for COVID-19, how long should you keep these training records on file?
Just like you would have training records on file, say for anything else, I would keep them for the same amount of time, especially during right now. Again, there's no really regulation saying how long you to keep these records, but I would keep them for just like any other training record that.
Okay.
Yeah, some of the standards require that you keep training records for 2 to 3 years, so I would keep it at least for 3 years. You could always upload them and keep them digitally. Some definitely.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. So if you do continue to train your workforce on items such as social distancing during breaks, wearing their masks, but you continue to find that they're not following the recommended protocol, what kind of plan of action would you advise?
Well, a couple of things with this, and that's a very good question. Is okay, why aren't they? I'm going to be honest about something. And I'm talking about the workforce, the Hispanic workforce out there that I go out there and do a lot of inspections, field inspections, and crew inspections. Some of these individuals don't think that this is real, or it's not going to happen to them, or they're immune to it. So it's kind of the re-educational portion of this. Until it hits somebody that they know that they've been infected by this, that might send a different message. But it's enforcing, and educating and training. It's constant. It's just not one-time training. You have to be constantly out there reminding these individuals the importance of doing this. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just like anything else. You don't just train one time. For example, like the heat illness, the heat is coming, and we got high heat hazard. You want to keep doing your training to remind everybody about the dangers of the heat exposures. Hector, anything else?
No, I think I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I agree with Dan. It's the retraining. If your question is more leaning on whether you should discipline that person that's not listening, it all depends on what your manual says on the disciplining procedures. But I would consider like any other safety policy, right? And if you're not wearing your eye protection, what do you do then? I mean, do you write somebody up? I would follow the same guidelines as any other safety and health policy that you have at work.
Perfect. Those are very good recommendations. Thank you both. Another question, kind of going over some of the safety equipment that growers normally provide to their workforce, and maybe safety equipment that's listed in their IIPP. If they are now unable to secure that same safety equipment, what recommendations or what protocols do you think growers should take?
So the question is, if they don't have it kind of cut out there for a minute. So if they don't have the recommended PPE, what should they use? Is that what the question is, Natalie?
Correct. Yeah, if they're unable to locate additional face masks, maybe a sanitizer, just something that's in their IIPP to keep their workforce safe.
Yeah, that IIPP is always live, just like your regular IIPP with the 8 elements. It should always be a live document. It should always be updated if something changes. So let's say you offer surgical masks. I'm just giving it as an example. And all of a sudden you run out of them or you can't find them. Then what's plan B? Are you giving out scarves? Are you giving out cloth masks? Are you giving out face shields? What are you giving out now? Then you would update that your program to reflect on what you're doing. It's going to be difficult. Obviously, the priority to get masks is given to our health workers and our first responders. So it's going to be changing on a constant basis depending on the availability of all the PPE that we have. So I would recommend changing it.
Perfect, thank you. And we had a grower write in with a couple good recommendations. They noted that in their vineyard, they're using the typical 2-row distance of their workforce working apart rather than the 1 row that they normally are doing. And they're also having their workforce work in alphabetical order in order to maintain a consistent record of who they were next to each day or who they've had contact with. But the question is, what is considered exposed to and in contact with? Is there a measurable distance? I guess this might go back to if the disease is airborne or how the disease can spread.
Yeah, that's a good question and very good recommendations. We'll take in consideration those recommendations. We follow CDC guidelines, which is the 6 feet. So if you're going to separate people, it's going to be based on what the CDC is recommending as on the 6 feet rule. Does that answer? Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, following obviously the guidelines that are put out, and that is kind of all that has been recommended right now. So I think if you keep the 6 feet distance, that is what's recommended, and I think that would be good. So those are actually all of the questions I have coming in at that time, and that actually brings us perfectly right up to an hour webinar. So at this time, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. And as a reminder, I will provide a link to the recording of this webinar as well as a PDF copy of the presentation. I will also provide Dan and Hector's information, which is also currently on the screen. If you would like to follow up with them to get a copy of the IIPP supplemental that they have created. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so the email for Dan Castillo is actually wrong. It's daniel.castillo@relationinsurance.com. So we'll change it on our PowerPoint and send it to you so you can give it out to our members, and it will have the correct information. So we apologize for that.
Yeah, it's my fault that we just hired a couple of Dans, and so I had to change my email. So it's my fault.
No, not a problem. I'll go ahead and make sure I provide that updated information to everyone. All right, so Hector and Dan, thank you guys very much, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
Take care. Be safe.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.